Hey everybody, savagelandsnews. I have the whole video coming right after this, but shortly after we completed this video, really interesting stuff. He actually made a breakthrough on his spreadsheet. So the numbers that we kind of look at on the screen during the video aren't exactly what is linked in the spreadsheet below, okay? So if you take a look at that now, you'll see that the numbers are updated, and it does look like he started reaching the same conclusion on Gambler's Gloves a little bit later, right? But it doesn't take away from the conversation. Everything was pretty much directly accurate while we were talking about it, but the numbers are different in the spreadsheet if you compare them to what you see on the screen. But all right, let's jump into it. Hey everybody, it's Savagelands News coming in this time with part 2 on brute math. This time accompanied by another ape I found in the Discords. Talking Rhinar math, Sean here, right? So we were having a big discussion in the Discord, and I saw that you shared a spreadsheet, and 90% of the time somebody shares something, right? I open it expecting to be really disappointed, and as soon as I opened it, I was really impressed on the numbers you'd kind of been throwing around, the thought you had put into your exercises, and all of that. So I really wanted to bring you on here so you can share your perspective of Rhinar and the math behind this supposed to be simple class, right? Yeah. So, if we want to give everybody a quick introduction on your, who you are, where they can find you, how long have you been playing Flesh and Blood?
Yeah. My name is Sean. I'm perfect octave in the Discord, notated to 8VE, which I realized was a silly thing that only music people would get.
Yeah.
I've been playing Flesh and Blood since like Monarch.
Okay.
Me and my friends would always play Magic. We played EDH all the time, and then we kind of slowed down on it and fell off. And then one of my buddies saw it while we were at our local store. And there were 4 of us, and there were 4 Blitz decks, and we were like, all right, let's do it. So yeah, I started with Bolton because that was the Blitz deck I got. I really liked him. He was super cool. I got a Raiden. But then I found out there were other heroes in this game by watching Prof's video, and he had a picture of Rhinar, and I was like, I need to be that guy.
Yeah, the green one. That one. I want that one.
Yeah, pretty much. My friends always joke that I only ever play green stuff. I played green in Magic, green or Gruul, sometimes green, red, blue. Played orcs in Warcraft, so
Hell yeah, man.
it's the perfect mix of theme, and once I got in, I found I really liked the mechanics of the deck too. So
Yeah.
it's the only hero I really play.
What was it about Rhinar that grabbed you, right? Because he's more of like a fringe hero a lot of the time,
I'm kind of a snowflake. I usually pick the mid tier. I played Link in Smash Bros. It's just how I do stuff. I'm a bit of a masochist, I guess.
Dude,
But also I like theme over stuff. So like when I found out that like the way he played, I liked. In addition to, he was by far my favorite hero of the crew, or of the available options. I was like, I'm just gonna play this deck until I can win something. So
I'm the same way. I always pick like the worst hero. I don't do it on purpose, but I always pick the worst thing on accident. It's like, like you said, Smash Bros, any fighting game, I'm like, I like that one. And then it turns out they're bad. And I'm like, I can make this better,
yeah. I'll
uh,
just be the blank mid tier guy or whatever.
yeah, okay, so you've been playing since Monarch. So you got in like right around the time another brute joined the set. A very interesting time in Flesh and Blood, right? Back when Prism was around. Rhinar was actually in not the greatest spot. He was okay then, right? But you stuck with it. That's really cool. So is there, I mean, aside from the thematics, now that you've been playing Rhinar for a while, is there anything in particular that like, what about his playstyle is unique to you?
Well, one is the Scabskin leathers, right? You can make a bet for action points, and I went through the whole journey that every brute player goes through, where like you get your boots and you're like, sweet, roll every turn, and then you're like, I'm never rolling. This is stupid. It's Battle Worn 2 equipment. And then now I roll a lot. I've kind of come way back, and now I kind of roll a lot again. After I dived into some brute math.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that. I think the deck is really interesting because there's so many decision points that you're making and that you're also forcing your opponent to make, because like people say intimidate has no value, but like if you intimidate the card they're away their optimal line, they're like recalculating, and if you get them on an off day, then they're making the wrong plays, and
Yeah.
you can just kind of be that wild card.
Yeah.
I'm also
Go ahead.
oh sorry.
Oh no, no, I was just gonna say a lot of people do think Intimidate doesn't have value, where like it makes no sense to me, right? It's like it's like saying Dominate doesn't have value. It's like, it only doesn't have value if it did nothing, but there's a huge amount of time it does something, right? Like there's no way, right? Yeah. I
Yeah,
just
like
think I
there's
think
the
that's
aggro
weird.
heroes who don't want to block, but they'll eventually need to block, so you just
Yeah.
have to get there, and then it does. So
Yeah.
um, I also like my primary hobby is D&D, and I'm a bit of a dice goblin, so that also facilitates it too. I'm already doing dice math to balance encounters, so I might as well do it for my lines too.
I'm also so you're the DM, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
Yeah, me too. I DM every
nice,
Thursday. Yeah, we talked about this a little
nice.
bit. Yeah. So, so okay, you pick the hero. He's green. He's big. He ended up actually having a fun play style. So, looking at your spreadsheet, we'll get into this later. It's heavy. We're gonna warn you guys right now. This conversation is gonna get heavy at certain points. What made you go down that rabbit hole of kind of doing all of that math? You said you're a dice goblin a little bit, but like, do you have like a math background, or what's really interesting to you about doing this?
I guess just like I don't know. I like diving into that kind of stuff in any game I play. I for a while I didn't even think about it, even though I was like doing a ton of dice math in my other hobby. It never really occurred to me to do it for the hero I play in Flesh and Blood.
Yeah.
And then I have to credit Grendel in the big Discord for this because during the Starvo meta, he posted like an EV calculator, and I saw it and I was like, why have I never done this for Scabskin leathers? So that's when I first started thinking about it, and then now I have a spreadsheet. So
Yeah, that's how it starts. You,
yeah,
you think about it for a second, and then you realize it goes so deep. You're 8 spreadsheets deeper, and not even
yeah,
much closer to being solved.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's one of the amazing things about Rhinar is after these couple of videos, like there's so many variables that it is very incredibly difficult to solve them, right? Like, because if it was just a simple if this then that, I think Rhinar would be amazing, right? But man, when you think about how many sixes you have in your deck, how much value you have in your hand, how much Scabskins can net you, how much life you're gonna lose, it's crazy.
yeah. And like I think like if Rhinar didn't exist, I probably would have ended up on Bravo because that's the kind of decks I played in Magic, the like ramp up and big hit decks.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm the kind of person who sticks with one hero, so I probably would still be playing Bravo, but like there's nowhere I don't know, like it's just there's so much more to think about with Rhinar than any other hero, just because of you're constantly thinking, do I make a bet here? Like, is it worth it? And you can have it, you think you can have it like outlined, and then you can realize you made the wrong bet later. And I don't know,
Yeah.
it's really really engaging.
I saw a tweet kind of recently where it was like a newer player, and it was basically along the lines of like the steampunk mechanologist building hero is actually an Unga Bunga aggro deck, and the green orc is a like a mathematician's deck. It's just weird. Like the more you play Reinhardt, the deeper it goes.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of hilarious.
Yeah. All right. So let's dive into a couple of these topics. We'll start off with a couple slides here on general topics, and then we'll jump right into like some actual plays and how to apply them to your Rhinar games. We'll see you there. Okay. So here we're gonna start diving into brute math. Our brutes secretly mathematicians, right? Beautiful drawing. Okay. So deck building with draw discard cards, right? Very complex topic. There's a huge risk and reward for playing these cards. And your spreadsheet that we'll jump into right after this is filled with a lot of math calculations and a lot of expected value calculations on these cards. So when you're playing with these cards, what were the biggest insights that you found?
Um, I so when I was playing in the Starvo meta, I was on the Pummel Claws idea. Because I was like, well, what's how do I beat Starvo? Or well, Blood Rush Bell is the best thing I can do, and then what do I do in the filler turns? I'll try to keep cards out of their hand, and then each strategy uses 2 cost attacks. So boom, Blood Rush Claws, easy peasy. Um, I pivoted to an aggro club pretty much when Dynasty came out, a little before Dynasty, just because like I was tired of losing to aggro decks. Um,
Yeah.
and like I don't know if this gives you a better matchup. Like I don't think I'm a good enough player to say, but I will say it feels much better to go for the high roll on the aggro decks and then maybe lose, and then you saved yourself a 30-minute grind fest,
Okay.
where like it felt like you were dying anyway. So I think, obviously you and Cole Pad Thai and all the other people who did really well at ProQuest with the claws decks, like, figured out how to do it. But I just like aggro club. I've ever since I made the switch, then I kind of dove into the dice math and everything, and I was like, I kind of like just embracing Rhinar's high roll potential.
Yeah. I mean, I can't blame you, man. There's nothing like high rolling somebody with Rhinar. Like there's nothing. It's a very rewarding feeling.
Yeah,
You know.
it's like, we it's like we have the ability to do it better than any other hero, so I just really like embracing that strength too.
Yeah. Yeah. So so when you were playing with these, one of my biggest problems with draw discard cards is particularly the way I construct my deck. Right. I lean really light on 6 attacks in general. I typically am sitting at 30, and there's a few times I'm a little bit below 30, which is like I would say on the low end of a Rhinar deck. Right. So you put that spreadsheet out, and I kind of started looking at optimal levels. Right. And so you the number, like the reward risk ratio for pulping and bare fangs go way down or way up depending on how you look at it with the more 6s you have in your deck, right? So you think 39 is like the magic number, somewhere around there?
Yeah, and it's always hard to do like a cutoff, because each extra 6 is a small incremental thing. So it
Mm.
really, I think it has more to do with the quality of your cards. Like if you're jamming yellow 6s to get your 6 count up so that these cards are more effective, you might not be on the right path, right?
Yeah.
I personally have felt good at 39 plus. I ran 36 for a while, and Wild Ride whiffed enough to where I was like, I hate this card.
Yeah.
But 39 plus feels pretty good. Like I have 42 in my list right now, but I wouldn't tell anyone to like push to 42 over 39. Like I feel like 39, you have enough good reds to where your card quality is good without worrying about your 6 count.
Okay, that makes sense. And then another one of the things I noticed when going through your spreadsheet, right, is running or the quantity of 6s in your hand when you play one of these draw discard cards has a massive impact on their success or failure rate, right? I think we found that a single 6 in your hand left when you play one of these cards has almost a 20% increase in the
Yeah.
probability of it hitting, that's a huge.
Right, yeah, because if you're doing a blind, our most valuable, like, besides Blood Rush Bellow, like our most like eking out offensive defensive value together is like blocking with 2 cards and then playing pulping with tunic up so that you can pulping off a blue and then club with a tunic. That's, you're blocking 6 and then you're coming in for like
11.
11 off
Yeah.
2 cards with your tunics. That,
Yeah.
it's huge. Um, so it's really good defensive value. But like if you're looking to really push damage, having 1 6 in hand when you play the pulping or the wild ride or the bare fangs or whatever, um, like you have it here, it increases it about 20% because all of a sudden you're taking away the ratio from your deck, and one outcome is the ratio from your deck and the other is a guaranteed hit. So it takes, what could be 75, 70, 60% hit and turns it into a 60% hit with a 100% hit. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it was crazy, right? Like
Yeah.
I put in the calculator the 39 39 6s, and then we kind of wiggled the math around a little bit, and it went from like a 60% hit rate to an 80 something percent hit rate with 1 6 in your hand. Which is crazy, right? So that stuck out to me a lot because a lot of the time when people talk about the club list, they mentioned exactly what you said. That one of the most optimal lines in the game is tunic plus a blue, wild ride pulping into a club. That's a 17-point swing of defensive and offensive value, which is pretty much like towards the ceiling of what most decks can do. But at the same time, it's the riskiest by a very, very large margin. So you're going to see a lot of this risk reward kind of ratio or tolerance acceptance when you play Rhinar, right? Like it's just part of the game, It's hard. That's why I don't play these cards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like it says there, every other 6 you add is like you've already, taken it all based on the deck ratio and added 50% success, 50% deck ratio. So like if you add 3 or 4 6s in hand, it helps a little bit, but the 1 6 already, like that's the biggest jump, is having at least
Yeah.
1 6 in hand.
Yeah, they only seem to be helping by like a couple of percents each, right? Like
Yeah.
after the first one. Yeah, really crazy. All right, let's dive into your spreadsheet real quick and explain, what you've lined up. The spreadsheet will be in the description below, and you guys will see it in just 1 second. See you there. So here we are with the spreadsheet on the screen. Sean will walk us through his reasoning. Don't be afraid. It's a lot of numbers. But we'll make it as easy to understand as we can for you. All right, take it away.
Yeah, so the first section here is the draw, discard, lines of play, and how I abstract it.
Hmm.
So the main thing here is number 6s in deck and number cards in your deck. That's going to be 60 usually, but if you go over, you can put it here. If you're running 36s, you'll see it updates all the numbers. I've got 42 in my deck, and that also consequently makes these nice and even, sort of.
Hmm.
So we'll stick with that. Changing that gives me a clean 70% ratio on the 6s in my deck.
Yep.
So yeah, you can see I've got most lines here that you would want for the cheetah cards. I don't have Wrecking Ball, even though I love the art, because it's just not good.
Yeah, it's
Unless,
just bad.
it's only really good against like Fatigue Oldtime, I guess. But
Yeah.
I got Meat Axe because I love it in Blitz. But so you see here, I've got Bare Fangs averaged at 7.4, assuming no other cards in hand. So this is saying if I am just playing Bare Fangs and I have no other cards in hand, the draw discard off the top of the deck, I got a 70% chance that it's going to be a 6.
Mm-hmm.
Now, while you play, you're losing 6s, so the ratio will change. So this is purely for building my deck.
Mm-hmm.
It's a rough average of how effective Bare Fangs is going to be. With 70% 6s in the deck, Bare Fangs comes out to 7.4.
Yeah.
So which kind of makes sense because if you put your 6s at 30, that's half 6s, half not. Bare Fangs either comes in for 6 or 8, so it averages 7. So all my formulas are in here. If you ever want to go deep into it, I won't get too deep into it, but this just tells you roughly how effective these are. Same with pulping or wild ride into club. I kind of do the same thing I did with Bare Fangs, but instead of the +2 from Bare Fangs relying on the percentage of 6s, it's the +5 from your club swing.
Yeah.
Relying on the percentage of 6s. So it's either 0 or 5 coming in with the club after these. So, in a deck with 70% 6s, the line of pulping into club is roughly worth 9.5.
Yeah.
So the way these lines are calculated, I'm not accounting for anything else in your hand, because sometimes you're pulping into wild ride, or pulping wild ride into club, pulping into club, just off of 2 cards. If you're doing pulping blue tunic, you're doing that off 2 cards.
Yeah.
So in that case, if you blocked 6 with your other 2 cards, that value is 9 plus 6, so 15.5. It's a good turn.
That's a really good turn.
Yeah. If you're using 4 cards to do pulping into club, say you have all reds, that's 9.5 for your whole 4-card value, which isn't great. So, that's how I built this, because these are the things that'll never change. The value of the line is the value of the line, no matter how many cards you use to pay for it.
Yeah.
And then if you get familiar with these, like, if you have this up while you're playing Talishar or something, you just get familiar with the value of the line, so you can do the napkin math mid-turn.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's so one of the things that keep in mind, and one of the other reasons, multiple reasons, it's really hard to evaluate Rhinar's hands on average, is because there's so many things going into it, right? So when I was doing all of my math, I just always assumed it was a blue being pitched. I always assumed the cards I was defending with were worth 3, and I always assumed that I was going to use like as little cards as possible, right? Because as soon as you start trying to map out like a 5-card pulping play, like, good luck, right? Like, good luck.
I tried.
Yeah.
I tried doing a list of all the 5-card plays in the deck, and it's just, it
Too
branches
much.
out. So Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have so many wild cards in there, like Beast Within, that's just worth minus or plus randomly. Yeah. So keep that in mind. A lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about is like more on the simple side, because typically Rhinar lives around the 2 to 3 card play anyways, right? Typically. It's actually pretty hard for Rhinar to dump all 5 cards. Like you're not going to see a pulping into a wild ride into a club very often. You know what I mean? It's not going to happen that often. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah. So yeah, and you can do this mid play too. So like if you maybe have pulping in Arsenal, you play another pulping, right? I'm not gonna abstract pulping into all the crazy, like you said, all the crazy things that can happen. But you can just be like, all right, I've done 6 so far. What if I pulping into club now? So that's 9.5 plus the 6. So you can check these lines mid turn, because the whole reason I made this is so that you can assign a number to them. Whereas most heroes, you can look at the corner of the card and say, all right, this is worth 6. This is like, abstracting the chance to fail and everything. This is what it would be.
Yeah.
And then you can see the columns. There's, this goes from 9.5 to 10.25 if you have a 6 in hand, 10.5 if you have 2, 10.625. So
It's a
like we
huge
were
jump.
saying before, yeah, you can see the biggest jump in the 1/6 in hand, and then each one's a small little optimization from there.
Yeah. And another thing, I thought this was really interesting is like once we started breaking all the math down across all these plays is like the polarization of these cards too probably has a lot to do with how the card is being played, right? The people who understand the math are keeping an extra card in their hand when they can, because it gives you a 20% increase almost, right? People who are running these cards with lower 6 quantities are having Bare Fangs barely, basically be the equivalent of a smash with Big Tree, right? So if you have 36s in your deck, don't run Bare Fangs. It's just a smash with Big Tree that can fail, and it does have an Intimidate, but it's basically a more risky one. Yeah, it could get rid of your Blood Rush, and then you lose, right? So really, really interesting stuff. I think those tear limb from limb lines are really interesting to me too, because I personally don't like that card. I don't believe in it, right? So it's interesting to see them have like 10, 11, and up to 15, point swings, right?
Yeah, and I love Tear Limb from Limb. It's probably my favorite card. I don't think it's the strongest card, but it's probably my favorite. So I put Bare Fangs here because the math is a little different than just 7 or 8, but you can see it here. And something to keep in mind, you're not going to be Tear Limb from Limbing with no 6s in hand usually. Like, usually it's better to pitch Tear Limb from Limb for whatever other play you're doing, but it's there just for everything else. Usually I think you play with 2 6s in hand for Tear Limb from Limb, or maybe got a good one in Arsenal.
How many cards is that? So like Tear Limb from Limb 6 attack line. How many cards do you need to fire that?
Tear from Limb, it depends on the 6 attack. So typically it's okay on a 6 attack. Let's say you have like a pack hunt in Arsenal, your Tear Limb from Limbing. It's probably like it's usually a 4-card play if you count the Arsenal as one of the cards. So like if I had pack hunt in Arsenal, you block with a card, play Tear Limb from Limb, you got 2 6s in hand. And then, if you end up with 2 reds, you can still play pack hunt in Arsenal something. So
okay.
I guess you could do it with one 6 in hand too.
As long as you had a yellow.
Yeah, usually it's a 4-card hand. Sometimes it's a 3-card hand. Sometimes it's a 5-card hand. I'd say usually I play it off a 4-card hand.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. The only reason I'm pointing that out is I still don't think that card's good.
I never run more than 2 because I usually have 2 reckless, and once you go past 4 of Tear Limb from Limb and reckless, your whiff chance gets
really high. You start whiffing on reckless. Yeah, stuff like that. Okay. Yeah, really, really cool. All right, should we dive back into the next topic? Because this next piece, I think, is mind blowing.
Yeah, the next part, the Scabs stuff, is like the main reason I built it. I just needed a way to value pulping and wild ride and Bare Fangs, which is why this part exists.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's typically how these math problems go. Is you start and you realize you have to solve 8 other things before you can even. Right. Yeah. All right, let's jump back into it. See you there. All right, so here we are. This one, I was really excited about this when you showed it to me. I was always looking for a way to calculate my Scabskins math that didn't require like 2-3 spreadsheets worth of formulas, right? And so you actually started talking about this, and it kind of blew my mind. But I think we owe a little bit of credit to Clay up in Canada, right? So Clay and Ian, they did very well, Canada Nationals. I believe he wrote an article about this, or this was inside of an article he wrote. I will link that article in the description below. But do you want to walk us through this calculation, because it's really useful?
Yeah. So I got the name of the spreadsheet from that article as well, Sand Sketch Math. I loved it, so I titled it that. So thanks, Clay. So yeah, the way that you can kind of quickly calculate at the table if it's worth to roll the Scabskins and assign a value to it is you take half the damage you would do on 2 action points and add it to 1/3 the damage you would do on 1 action point. So if we're looking at Pack Hunt and Club, on 2 action points, we're doing 10 damage, 6 + 4. On 1 action point, we're swinging Pack Hunt for 6. So 10 damage divided by 2 is 5. 1/3 of 6 is 2. So 5 + 2 is 7. So, mid game, we can, run that. You might have to practice a little math or whatever, but you get pretty familiar with it eventually. You run the line and you're like, okay, Scabs, Club, Pack Hunt is worth 7, on average.
Yeah.
This is a good example of why this is a bad bet to make, because offensively, this is 7. Let's say you take 3 cards to do it, because, you pitch 1 card to play Pack Hunt, you pitch another to play Club. You block with 3, your 4-card hand value is 10, which is really bad.
Yeah.
If you block with 3 cards, say they're all 3 blocks, you block 3 cards and swing Club, that value is 13, because you're blocking 9, swinging 4.
Yep.
And that's way better than 10. So the other thing you can do, so you can just kind of get used to doing it. If you get stuck on the 1/3, like if you're swinging big, right? 1/3 of 8 is kind of annoying to calculate. So just round down or up, or you can even do abstract it to 0.5. It's not going to be that different. And then if you have gloves up, my spreadsheet goes in the calcs for the exact EV. But if you have gamblers or SkullCrushers up, either one, it's about a point of damage. So if you have gamblers or SkullCrushers up on this 7, you could abstract it to 8. So
okay. Yeah, this one's really, really interesting, because you can do it at a table, right? You can do this in your head mostly, right? It looks hard, but once you kind of you sit and think about it for a little bit, it's really not that hard, right? You're dividing by 2, and then you're just averaging or guessing what a third of a number is, and then not that big of a deal. But this is super helpful, because there's been a couple times where I'm trying to evaluate a play, and I'm thinking about all of the math, right? All of the stuff we've been trying to work out over the last couple of weeks, and I'm like, oh, this is too hard, I'll just guess, right? But this is like, oh, here, I'll just do this. It might not be perfect, but I mean, it's all probability anyway, so it's not like you could measure it perfectly and roll 2 ones and then you're still the same. So this is good enough,
Yeah, the way I'm using it to practice is I've got, if I'm playing Talishar or something, I've got it up on another monitor, the spreadsheet for like the exact EV. And then if I'm playing in an armory or something, I just, practice this here, trying to get it in the brain.
Yeah, this is really cool. I like this one a lot. Thanks to you for showing it to me, and thanks to Clay for writing it somewhere. Amazing. Okay. So let's get into the final piece of the conversation before we jump into, evaluating lines together.
That says Gablers.
I'll fix that. Be right back. Okay. So now that we've fixed the problem, I'm going to start off this conversation with, this is one of the most complicated parts about trying to solve quote unquote Rhinar, right? I think SkullCrushers and Gambler's Gloves are very hard to measure, because there's a million different situations that you're playing that impact the analysis of these cards in general, right? Like there's just there's so much math being applied to this. So I think a lot of people we've begun to reach a consensus. But even then, if you guys ever tune into our Discord, somebody brings up Gambler's Gloves versus SkullCrushers, and we spiral for like 45 years, right? There's like 15 people arguing over which one's better. So here we're going to abstract it down a little bit and simplify it, I think. And and I'm currently working on a calculation, or hopefully it's done by now, but we'll see. On trying to solve this, but I don't know if it's ever going to be solved, to be honest. All right, so SkullCrushers, right? What do you think about SkullCrushers versus Gambler's Gloves from your perspective?
Yeah. So, and just to, I'm an armory hero. I have not won anything like huge. So everything I say subjective. Take it with a grain of salt. I'm very confident in the math of the spreadsheet and the EV of the lines, but
Me
your
too.
game experience will tell you, you know, what what you need to do. So I personally think SkullCrushers is better.
Hmm.
Um, one, it's a little more fun to play with. But
That's worth a point of value.
yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll go to the spreadsheet after this. But essentially, SkullCrushers and Gamblers are very, very close EV wise. Um, I would say Gamblers would be the go-to for sure. Like you can't even argue it if it guaranteed you didn't hit a one again, or even if it, even better if it guaranteed the 2+ action points.
Yes. If it did that, it
Um,
would be bar none the best. Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
the fact that Gamblers still gives you the chance of failure, it
Mhm.
means you can't really roll willy nilly. Just like, oh, I have Gamblers up, I'm not going to hit the one. You still have to weigh the one. So if you're still weighing the risk of a one, you look at what you're doing. Gamblers ups your percentage of not hitting the one or of pushing your big play a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, so it raises your floor a little bit. Um, SkullCrusher, which makes it a little more offensively better than SkullCrushers. Um, SkullCrushers will give you an anthem effect on a 5 or 6, so that ups your damage. On the flip side,
Mhm.
um, but it also has block. So the calcs are very close. If you just give SkullCrushers 1 point of value from the block, that's not including on hits.
Mhm.
SkullCrushers ekes it out by like 0.1%. So it's very, very close. Um,
Mhm.
my argument for SkullCrushers is that if you block an on hit with SkullCrushers, if you block a snatch with it, that one becomes 4 because you're
Yeah.
blocking 1 damage and you're stopping the card draw. Um, and the fact that SkullCrushers can trigger multiple times, so it can give you 2, mini Blood Rush Bellows throughout the game. So I
Mhm.
like SkullCrushers because I think the combination of the defensive utility with the offensive utility is worth more than the bump in consistency Gamblers gives you, because Gamblers can still, not do anything.
Totally. Yeah. This is what I mean. I think the community is pretty split because it's so hard to measure these, right? Like I sit on the Gamblers Gloves team, you sit on the SkullCrushers team. We're very divided as a community. And I think but what you said is really true, right? So the block value I mean, this is why it's hard to measure. It's conditionally relevant, right? Sometimes you explode your gloves before you get a block value, right? Which often leads to people wanting to block with SkullCrushers really early and not save it for a hit effect. But then if you stop a hit effect, you get the whole 3 points extra of value, and you're starting off with a +4, and that means the Gambler's Gloves has to do a minimum of +4 value. Yeah, so it's hard to measure these things, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I've blown my gloves up turn one a lot because you really don't want to roll before you get the value out of it. Sometimes the play is just so good if you roll for it, and
yeah,
then but
yeah.
if you blow up your gloves, you get no value out of your gloves, and that's just, well, what do I do now? So
Yeah, and then it's the same
playing
thing
on
on
hard mode.
Gamblers, right? Like I
Yeah.
have double one multiple times, right? Multiple times double one with Gamblers Gloves up, and then it was just a useless piece of equipment that did nothing for me. No AV was gained, or EV was gained. No block was to be had, right? Yeah. So this is a really complicated situation or equation for us brute players to kind of map out. But like you said, SkullCrushers have a block value, and you have to consider that in your comparisons, right? It has immediate value on the table, right? Every single turn, it has a block value you can start off with, and every single time you roll, it triggers. There's no decision to be made. So that kind of leans it to being also, I would say, slightly more beginner friendly because you put it on the table and it just does what it does as you play the game, and blocking is pretty simple, right? You throw it in front of a snatch, you did your job, right?
It
Um,
also makes sense too because like saying it's beginner friendly makes sense because like it really kind of teaches you when to roll scabs, because like
yeah.
you know, you could be making bad bets doing that pack hunt into club, and with gamblers up, it's like, well, you know, I might as well roll to see if I get the extra 4. But with crushers, you really have to kind of weigh, is this a good bet or not? So,
Yeah,
which you
that's a
should
really
be doing
interesting
with
point.
gamblers too. So
Yeah, because like I know the math, and every once in a while I will roll for an extra claw. Like I do it. I know it's dumb. I know it's bad value, but like depending on the game state, I'll do it. And it's because I have gambler's gloves and I feel a little bit more invincible, you know? And that's probably bad habit. Like rolling for just a claw is probably a dumb idea, um but okay. I digress. So gambler's gloves, right? What is interesting about gambler's gloves? I think you pointed this out. It's been discussed a little bit in the community, but you should be using them to re-roll on 2s and 3s, right?
yeah, and it feels and this is where like more so than saving yourself from a 1, like this is where it feels really bad. Where if you roll a 2 or 3 and you re-roll into a 1, it
Mm-hmm.
feels terrible.
Mm-hmm.
But mathematically it's the correct play because you will succeed and gain your 2 action points more often if you re-roll the 2 or 3, because if you roll a 2 or 3, you already lost a bit of your bet because you kept cards,
Yep.
so you lost that bet. You just didn't lose it as hard as a 1. So if
Yeah.
you really need to push that play to keep up, for instance, I roll much more recklessly against like Fi and the Rune Blades because they have way better math than us, so you kind of
Mm-hmm.
have to.
Yeah.
In aggro club. I know, you know, Claude's
Either
is
way.
kind of,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Rude blades are still a
Um,
bad matchup for me too.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just hard for all the brutes out there. So
Yeah.
like it's, you know, especially like if you're pushing a big play, yeah, just mathematically it's better to re-roll the 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Um,
And you kind of also pointed out there's like gambler's gloves helps also, I would say, more against certain matchups like Dash, right? Arg Smash, Prism back in the day, right? Like I would, you know, in one of my most recent games on the channel, it was like in the semis of one of the pro quests, and I rolled a 2 on Arg Smash, and I popped gamblers and I rolled because I needed to crush more items, and I got the 6, and it paid off. Had I gotten a 1, I would have been triggered. But like you said, mathematically it made sense. I had one copy of it. I need it to do something. I'm popping my gambler's gloves, right? Like that's what they're for.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good example of how it could be matchup dependent too. Like against, you know, Dromai, I might roll for extra damage, but if I'm packing gamblers, I might not pop for extra damage because I want to save them for when I really need to clear auras, you know, get
Yeah.
it into aura thing. So
Yeah. They were, I mean, gambler's gloves were like a staple in the Prism matchup because you were basically rolling every turn. Your claw,
yeah,
claw, swing face, claw, claw, swing face, right? Yeah, it's hard. Okay. I think one of the things that we kind of also agreed on, which is again rare in this conversation as brute players, is if you win or lose the game with gamblers still up, you should be using crushers. Like you said, it's mathematically better to use it on a 2 and a 3. If you're not taking advantage of your equipment, like you might as well get the one block, and the chance that you got additional damage through the game, right? And then I think you
yeah,
pointed this one out. Rolling with gamblers is still a risk, right?
yeah, because you know, it's very natural to feel comfy with the gamblers up. Like, oh well, I could eke in a club swing, or I could even eke in 6+6 here.
Mhm.
Like, and it feels comfy to make that roll because it's like it's very unlikely that I'll roll the 1 again. But like, there is the, you are still making a bet because you're keeping cards to roll. So
Mhm.
you know, there's that. So if you're, you know, if gambler saves you from the 1, you still lost out on the bet because you took extra damage.
Yeah.
So like, you still have to evaluate as if you don't have the reroll when you're rolling with gamblers, because like you could still just 1 into 1, or you could not get the 2 AP still. So
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Okay, so now that we've kind of gone over some of these concepts, you want to dive into your spreadsheet one more time, and then we can kind of go look at a couple lines, and we can talk about what we think of value when we play Rhinar during like a hand state.
yeah,
All
sounds
right,
good. All
let's do
right.
it.
So back to the spreadsheet here, and we're at down to the next section, which is our Scabs lines of play. So I put in a column for no gloves, a column for crushers, gamblers if you're only re-rolling the 1, and then gamblers if you re-roll the 2 or 3, and then
Hmm.
some notes here.
Okay.
Um, so I added some claw lines since I initially posted it in Discord too, because originally it was just the lines in my deck. So I added a
Mm-hmm.
few. This isn't all your lines, you know. You can feel free to copy it, put in the lines in your deck, and then, you know, see how to value that. Um, so valuing EV, I kind of put this here because this is copied from the EV calculator I was using. It kind of explains the formula.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm doing in each of these cells. So all this gobbledygook of numbers, this is all just effectively adding up the number of sides with the chances that they show up at. So on the gloves discussion, we can see if we look at maybe a common line of Bearfang's club, that's usually a really good Scabs line to run, or
Mhm.
the values skewed to toward it where it's a good bet usually.
Mhm.
So with no gloves, it's worth about 8.5.
Yeah.
With crushers, it's worth about 9. With gamblers, if you're re-rolling the 1 or 2 to 3, it's about 10.
Mhm.
So gamblers offensively is giving you about 1 point more. But crushers, if we add the point of defense from crushers, that's 10.1.
Yep.
Gamblers actually pulls out ahead if you re-roll the 2-3 here of 10.3.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I've been finding recently on one roll, gamblers is better. Gamblers gloves. On 2 rolls, crushers is better. And then around 3 rolls, it goes back to gamblers. It's weird.
Yeah, and like it brings up an interesting thing because like your average of a d6 is 3.5.
Mhm.
That's your average roll. So like if you start out rolling hot, if you have crushers right and you roll a 5 and 6, like you are starting out with that average way high. So every
Yep.
roll you make, you're risking bringing the average lower.
Yep.
Um, if you start out rolling a 1, it might be correct to keep rolling until you bring the average back up, because
Yeah.
like
No.
what
100%.
yeah, what a lot
It
of new people mistake is they roll a 1, they get punished, and they think, all right, I'm not going to roll anymore. But like that can be incorrect, because then you dug yourself a hole, and the tool you have to dig yourself out of holes you're not using. So
exactly. In one of my ProQuest games against a Briar, I double won, right?
yeah,
Immediately double won, and set me back like what, 12, 15 life or whatever that was. The
it's real
rest
bad.
of the game, I rolled the whole game. Just
Yeah,
roll, 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 because like I already double won. I'm not gonna win again. I mean, I did win
yeah,
again. I won 3 times in that game, but eventually the 6s dug me out. you know?
yeah. It's a bit freeing in a way where it's like, well, I'm down here now. I have to play really recklessly to catch up, especially
Yeah.
if it's like a deck like Briar that their channel mount's coming, and it's like, ah, crap,
It's
I'm on a
it's
time.
really nice to have no cares anymore about rolling and go full gorilla mode, just it feels nice every once in a while to do it.
Yeah, and like rolling here, like having the EV for the Scabs rolls is really helpful for me, because like even if I roll a 1, I can look at the math and know, all right, I made the correct play. This is the equivalent of drawing all reds, even though I balanced my blues correctly.
Yeah.
Like, it's just we have variance on the card draw and variance on the D6. It's the same kind of variance, but the D6 is locked. It's always going to be a D6.
Yeah.
So
Luckily for us, math is on our side. Just
yeah,
maybe not in that individual game sometimes.
right.
Yeah.
So like one of my favorite claws lines is, if I got crushers and claw, if you have tunic up, you block out, and then you have a blue, and it's like the lowest risk roll you can do, where you know if you roll a 0, you're only missing out on 3 damage than if you didn't roll. If you roll a 2 or 3, it's the same. If you roll a 4, you're doing 6, and if you roll a 5 or 6 when you have crushers and double clawing, like it's
Yeah.
just you're coming in on 8 off 1 card. It's pretty good.
Crushers, another hard part about all the math, right, is Crushers is more beneficial the more attacks you have across a turn, because once they trigger once, so this is one of the hard parts for about me doing the math, right? You only have to trigger them once. So it's not your EV across multiple attacks is not actually the same when you've already activated Crushers and you're attacking 3 times. Your EV is only on the first card, and then it's actually locked at max value for the rest of the chain. So as you can imagine, breaking that down into a math is very hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
super hard. And like all of this that needs to be taken within context, because even if the math tells you it's more valuable to roll than it is to play it safe, if a 1 literally loses the game for you, like it's worth cutting 2 damage to not roll. Like if
exactly.
you're going to lose no matter what. If you see the writing on the wall and it's like this guy's grinding me out, I'm going to lose in 3 turns, then maybe you do roll to see if you get out of it. So
yeah, game knowledge and the situation is always going to outvalue the math, in my opinion. Like I said, sometimes I'll roll for a claw because it's like, that's what I got to do. You know, I need to rip a card out of this guy's hand. He just threw a pulverize in his arsenal. I need to do whatever I can to do as much damage here as possible because my turn's going to be over. I'll roll, right? Like, yeah, just got to make the decision.
Yeah. So some interesting parallels. If we're looking at some, I've seen some people say maybe even Scabs before pulping or Wild Ride.
Yeah.
If you have Crushers up, to go for the buff, but like it's better to, with all this looking that I've done, it's better to, the safe gambles will eventually get you there, and then sometimes you have to make big gambles, but that's just how it is. I almost kind of, when I'm playing with Crushers, I almost play it like Gamblers, where with Gamblers, if you get the 1, you re-roll it, and then you kind of, your Scabs calcs are different because it's like, I don't have Gamblers up anymore. With Crushers, if you roll a 1, you blow them up. It's kind of the same where, all right, I have now lost my chance at getting the +1, so rolling again is not as worth it. So
yeah,
the play line is kind of the same. It's just, are you going for the different upsides? But yeah. So yeah, you can see Pulping Wild Ride Club, 9.5 if you have no other cards, 10 most of the time because usually you're playing it off a 3-card hand.
Yeah, you SkullCrushers people are wild animals, dude. I cannot imagine rolling without Gambler's Gloves before Wild Ride or a Pulping. I cannot imagine. Why?
I've done it a few times and I was rewarded. So the hardest part is when you get rewarded for bad bets and then you just go full unga bunga mode.
Yeah, just like that 2 extra damage you're gonna get is not. Yeah. I just can't imagine doing that. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I mean by the numbers, it's a bad bet, right? So if you Scabs Pulping Wild Ride Club, it's worth 8. If you Pulping Wild Ride Club without rolling Scabs, it's worth 10.
Yeah, so it doesn't make sense.
It's not really there. What is there is that you Scabs, if you Pulping Wild Ride, you've already done 6 damage on your turn, so now you have a really safe roll where I either end my turn here, but I did 6 damage, so I lost a little bit, or I get way big value from doing 2 more attacks here if I have like a good arsenal. So
yeah, that makes sense. Sometimes I'll roll in the middle of a Blood Rush Bellows turn.
Yeah,
because like I already got my claw out of the way, and I can either just send 8 or I can Savage Feast out and possibly get 16. I'll almost always go for the 16, right?
Yeah. And like the hero you're playing against really influences this. Like
True.
If you're playing against Bravo or Dory, like those kind of gambles don't make sense. Well, I guess I don't know. This is my subjective opinion.
Yeah.
But like if you're playing against Briar or Viserai or Phi, any of those hyper aggro that just like, in my opinion, you start so far behind them, like catch up.
Yeah. So. Yeah, very dependent on who you're playing against. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other roll lines, Savage Feast is probably it's like Savage Feast is our biggest upside roll outside of Blood Rush Bellow.
I think so, yeah.
But it's kind of hard to value on paper. So like if you look at the numbers here, it doesn't look anything special. It looks like the same ones as up here.
Yeah.
But it's all about how you value the card you draw. So if you take away the card you draw, Savage Feast is the same as Yellow Savage Swing or whatever, and you're and I have 3 different scenarios because again I don't have a 7 because I don't run any natural 7s in my deck, but it's pretty easy to copy this and have it there. I've got one for Bear Fangs. But what this is doing, these are 3 example lines where Scab, Savage Feast, on a 2 or 3, I play the 6 attack and then club. Well, I can't club, but I have a 6 that I'm discarding, and then on a 2 or 3, I'm playing the 6. Same with Bear Fangs, same with an 8 like Swing Big.
Yep.
So if we take Bear Fangs here, or we'll just do the 6 again. It's simple. Without any gloves, Savage Feast into club, the Scabs line is worth 7.5, but you draw a card. So if you have an empty arsenal, you can value that depending on the card you draw. If you draw a 10.5 almost. Yeah, exactly. You can add 3. On average, I originally was adding 3 to this because that's usually what it is. But if you draw a Swing Big and Arsenal it, that's 4. So that's 11.
Or you could get like a blue Clearing Bellow or a Wreck-a-Romp and then you're screwed. But like
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the value, sometimes you're arsenaling a card where it's kind of easy to say that's worth 3 or not.
Mhm.
Sometimes you're extending your turn. Maybe you roll a 6 and then you can use that to get 2 other attacks. So Savage Feast is really hard to value on paper, but like most of the time you can just add 3 to these numbers
Yep.
and call it a day. And when you do that, this is by far the biggest, number in the list here of roll lines.
Yeah, the amount of times like I off the top a command and conquer or like a swing big is ridiculous,
Yeah.
because then it's that's 12 with an on hit or 14 right off of off of a 2 or 3 cards. Like it's a lot. And then it works
Really
with
good.
claws too. Those of you who are claw players, right? No matter what you draw, you get a minimum of 6. Because like if you pitch the blue to do it, you have 2 floating, that's 1 claw. And then if you have tunic and a red, it's 1 more claw. If you draw a yellow, it's another claw. If a blue, it's another claw. And then you can do some really gross things like Savage Feast, claw, swing big, and then you're happy.
So like you can pretty safely say mathematically it's always correct to roll for Savage Feast, and then that's where game state comes in. It's like if I have a swing big, like I think it's technically more valuable to block with the feast and swing big, but like,
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
it's more offensive value to go for the Savage Feast play. So it really just depends on your situation.
Yeah, my most 2 commonly rolled cards are Savage Feast and Tome of Fyendal.
Yeah.
Just huge upsides.
And then that then suddenly, I would definitely be playing Gamblers in your deck because those are like really high valuable plays that you want to push through with Gamblers, as opposed to Crushers, which is like it just adds on to your good bets.
Yeah. I'm only rolling like when I have to or when those cards show up, kinda. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there was talk in the Discord when I posted this about like, well, you should factor in swinging for 4 on a 2 to 3 because you might arsenal your 6 or your bare fangs or your swing big, which is valuable, right? But if your arsenal's filled, you can't arsenal it or whatever. Yeah. So if you are swinging club instead of playing the middle card on a 2 to 3, you can take like half a point away, something like that.
Yeah,
it's a pretty easy adjustment. It's mostly the same. Yeah. So
I mean this is a lot of information already. Sorry, right. Everybody. This is a heavy set of videos, but it's really, I mean, if you want to play Rhinar, this is the kind of stuff you're going to eventually get into, right? Like eventually.
It's the kind of stuff you internalize after getting reps. It's just this is it on paper.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, should we jump into some like hand evaluation now?
Yeah.
Put this to practice?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. I'll see you guys there. All right, so here we're going to just quickly kind of go over a couple hands and how you can evaluate them now that we have, these numbers here like kind of calculated. So go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, so immediately we have swing big here. So let's look at what a roll line with swing big would be. So I'm just going to assume Crushers because it's my favorite. And we'll do Scabs, swing big, club. It's about 9. It's a little more than 9, but about 9. So if I had a tunic, I can swing big off the blue, tunic, club, and then block with these 2. Yep. So that's 6 plus 9. So that gives me 15. That's really good.
15.3. Yeah.
If I don't have a tunic, I'm doing that off 3 cards. So, swing big, club, block with 3. So that's 9, 10, 11, 12. It's an average turn.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would do it for that because if I block 2 swing big, that's 8 plus 6. So that's 14. So not worth it rolling for the 3 cards if you don't have tunic.
Yeah, you're basically gaining 2 points of damage with the risk of losing everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you really have to block, you block with these and then swing club. If they throw a ton of on hits at you, we don't really want to block with swing big much. But if we have to, block 9, swing club, that's 13 value. So,
and then you pocket your swing big, which is 4 value. Not bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess if you blocked 6, swing club, pocket swing big,
it's 14.
Yeah, 14. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. I mean, and this is as I play Rhinar, right? This is almost exactly what I do every single turn. Like a lot of people, some people have mentioned like, wow, you move your hands fast, you play, because like as soon as I draw my 4 cards, our lines are like super clear as Rhinar, right? Swing Big stands out, and then I pick the blue Wrecker Romp is my pitch card because it's one of our best pitch cards. You put those two to the side, and then you look at everything else, and you're like, what can I do with this? These are basically worth a block. And then, subconsciously, I was doing exactly what he just laid out. I was like, okay, Scabskins with 2 cards is this much, with 3 cards is this much, and with 4 cards is this much. Is it worth the risk? And I would almost always be like, the only one worth the risk is the blue with Tunic line, right? Like that's what we just determined is the most mathematically accurate. And then you block with the rest of your hand. So you can kind of, you start doing this in seconds. You see 4 cards, you pick a line, you pick a dangerous line, you compare the two, and then you choose, right?
Yeah. So like mid game, and I had Tunic, I would definitely go for the Tunic play.
Yep.
At the end of the game, when the opponent doesn't have armor, like throwing out a Swing Big gives you room to set up the kill later. So like then that's more correct. So yeah, it's all in context. If we do one more here, that's another Swing Big play.
That's beautiful. Oh,
hey, Blood Rush. Here we go. This is fun. This gets kind of hard to value, but generally like here Blood Rush is hard because then you need to know like Arsenal, Tunic.
Yeah, this is Blood Rush is probably too hard. Also, that's a bad Blood Rush hand.
I would probably here's decent, right? Pulping, Reckless, Pack Haul, Blood Rush, Bellow. There's a bunch of different ways you could play this hand. So under the most pressure, usually we try not to block with Blood Rush, but under the most pressure, block 9, Arsenal, Pulping. You could probably call that as like 3 value.
You have a Reckless though,
value, right? Oh yeah, Reckless. Sorry,
you stuck with Reckless here.
Yeah. So let's do what I would actually want to do. I would actually want to Blood Rush into Pulping into something else. I would usually roll here in club because it's not a guarantee you have Pulping for your Blood Rush turn.
Yep.
Usually it's good to like mathematically correct to roll before you Blood Rush. So because your club is a 7, and that pushes the average up really well. So, if we look at Scabs, Blood Rush, Bellow, Bare Fangs Club, it's similar to
so that, context there is mathematically relevant to roll when you have club, specifically club, because otherwise this is a sick claw hand.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So if we look at, if we're not going for the Blood Rush, if we're under some pressure, maybe we have Tunic up, we block 6, and we Pulping into club with the Tunic off the Reckless. Pulping, Wild Ride, club. Pulping, Wild Ride, club, worth 10. We add 6 to that. That's like a 16-point turn. Or sorry, that's 9. So we add that's like a 15.5-point turn off Tunic. That's really, really good. If we block with the Blood Rush and we keep a 6 in hand, not an often scenario. Pretty much the only line I would do is Blood Rush here.
Yeah, because like
under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I mean, because you can basically, again, you always boil this down. I mean, typically Rhinars want to keep their Blood Rush, so this is kind of like, talking about Blood Rush hands is a little different than any other turn because like a lot of the time I'm willing to give up like almost 10 points of value for a Blood Rush because I'm on the clause version, right? I'm gonna do 20. I can give up 10, right? Like, 10's a lot. I would like to keep up how much I give up around 6. It's like if it takes me taking 6 damage and putting a Blood Rush in my arsenal, I'll do it, right? But so it's a little awkward. But
this is a good example of a line that doesn't fit on a spreadsheet, just because Blood Rush opens up so many other things.
Yeah, drawing 2 random cards by itself is enough to make this impossible to understand, right?
Yeah. We'll do one more real quick because this is a better example.
Yeah, this is a great one.
Savage Feast, there's our favorite one. So if we look at our Savage Feast play, we got a blue, we have 6s. So, I immediately look at blocking 1, Savage Feasting into club. So Savage Feast, my middle's a 6 either way. If I have Crushers up, that's about 8. And then I add 3, so that is 11. Then if I add 3 more for the drawn card, probably, that 11, 12, 13, 14. So that's a 14 damage turn, right? Or 14 value turn right there.
Yeah. And you can, you would block with the Command and Conquer because you're going to discard 1 anyways. You keep the Skull Crush because it'll give you a free resource. The free resource can get compounded into your turn. That means that even if you draw a 3 cost attack, you're going to be able to play it, which means that you like there's a really high probability you're going to be able to play 6 damage no matter what you draw, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, and like, but then, you know, if you're playing against like a Phi where they don't have Crown of Providence, like maybe I keep this Command and Conquer for 2 or 3, arsenal that and try again next turn or something.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I'll value Command and Conquer really high to the point where like it'll have more value than doing extra damage would, right? Like, because if you're pretty sure the Phi has an Art of War in his pocket, like go for it, make him block, take that thing away, you know.
Yeah, so like that's kind of how you can use these numbers to line up your plays. So like I said, you know, maybe do it on felt table first, so you're not making your Talshar opponent wait like 10 minutes for you to run lines or whatever. But honestly, Rhinar is one of the heroes that can benefit a lot from goldfishing on felt table, because then you can test your 6 ratio and you can also test your EV lines, even if your opponent is doing unintelligent things.
Yeah,
it's an AI. So.
Yeah, I mean, people on Talishar do unintelligent things all the time. So,
yeah.
Well, I mean, this is super informative. I really, really appreciate you coming on, sharing this spreadsheet with the community. It's very nice of you to do this, right? A lot of players out there will keep their hidden stuff to themselves, you know. So we all appreciate you. It was really fun talking to you. You're a great guy. Thanks for coming on the channel. And you guys can find him in the Rhinar Discord, talking it up with everybody. And I'll put is it cool if I put your Discord name down on the bottom?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, I'll flash the Discord name up on here. You can find him in the Rhinar Discord.
But yeah, I talk about, you know, I like talking Rhinar for lots of stuff. I can to get really deep there. Yeah,
it's super fun. I really appreciate it. It is weird to be able to nerd out like this with a random person we met in a community like this. It's really cool, you know. All right. But thanks for watching, everybody. If you made it this far, it's a lot of math. Have a great day.